The emergency beacon crackled through subspace with desperate urgency. Ambassador Kethrak of the Zephyrian Collective pressed his four-fingered hands against the communication console. His blue-scaled face creased with worry as he listened to the transmission from the Outer Rim colonies. Mayday, Mayday. This is Colony 7 Alpha requesting immediate humanitarian assistance. Plague outbreak confirmed. Population dying rapidly. Request medical supplies, food, and evacuation vessels. Repeat, we need humanitarian aid immediately. The transmission cut to static, leaving the council chamber of the orbital station in tense silence. Kethrak looked around at the assembled representatives from 12 different species. The collective had faced many challenges in its 300 years of existence, but nothing quite like this. How many souls are we talking about? Asked Counselor Vexani, her crystalline form shimmering with concern. 2 million beings across 15 settlements, replied Kethrak grimly. The plague is spreading faster than their medical facilities can handle. Our own relief ships are engaged with the disaster in the Beta Centauri system. The nearest collective fleet won't arrive for 6 standard weeks. Too long, rumbled General Thaxor, his massive frame making the reinforced chair creak. By then, half the colony will be dead. Kethrak nodded, his throat sac inflating slightly with stress. The Zephyrian leader had seen many crises during his 40-year diplomatic career, but time was always the enemy in situations like this. Lives hung in the balance while bureaucracy and logistics moved at their usual pace. What about the border worlds? Suggested Counselor Marin, her tentacles writhing nervously. Surely someone has available relief vessels? The Korthari Empire is dealing with their own problems, Kethrak replied, consulting his datapad. 3 solar flares damaged their infrastructure. The Valdris Union just committed their entire humanitarian fleet to the refugee crisis in Sector 9. The council fell silent again. Each representative knew what this meant. They were looking at a potential catastrophe, and the usual solutions were unavailable. The collective prided itself on never abandoning member worlds, but their resources were stretched thin across the galaxy. Wait, said Dr. Lenthera, the collective's chief medical officer. Her insectoid features clicked together as she accessed her personal database. There's one possibility we haven't considered. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. The doctor rarely spoke during political discussions, preferring to focus on her research and medical duties. The humans, she said simply. The reaction was immediate. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. General Thaxor's combat scars seemed to darken. Even Kethrak felt his scales ripple with uncertainty. The humans. Vexani's crystalline voice carried a note of surprise. But, they're new to galactic civilization. Barely 50 years since first contact. What could they possibly offer? Dr. Lenthera consulted her files. Their medical technology is surprisingly advanced, and they've shown remarkable adaptability. More importantly, their industrial capacity is growing rapidly. They might have available ships. Available, perhaps, General Thaxor rumbled, but are they suitable for humanitarian work? Everything we know about human vessels suggests they're primarily military in nature. The general wasn't wrong. Humanity had entered the galactic stage during a period of intense territorial expansion. Their first major contact with collective worlds had been a series of border skirmishes that everyone preferred not to discuss in detail. Since then, relations have been cordial but distant. Their military background might actually be helpful, Dr. Lenthera insisted. Military vessels often have advanced life support systems and can be reconfigured quickly. And humans seem to have an unusual talent for improvisation under pressure. Kethrak considered this. The ambassador had only met humans twice in his career, both times during formal diplomatic functions. They seemed pleasant enough, if somewhat intense. Their representatives always appeared eager to help, but also carried themselves with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Do we know their fleet disposition? Asked Counselor Marin. Limited information, admitted General Thaxor. They're secretive about their military capabilities, but intelligence suggests they have a significant number of vessels in the nearby sectors. Something about a training exercise. The Council exchanged glances. Human training exercises had become legendary throughout the collective, though details were always scarce. Other species' military observers were rarely invited, and the few reports that filtered back described scenarios of unusual complexity and intensity. I propose we contact them, Kethrak said finally. Time is critical, and we can't afford to ignore any potential source of aid. The worst they can do is refuse. And the best they can do? Asked Vexani. Save 2 million lives? Replied Dr. Lenthera firmly. The vote was unanimous. Kethrak activated the quantum communicator and began composing the message to Earth's diplomatic corps. He chose his words carefully, emphasizing the humanitarian nature of the crisis and the urgent timeline. Humans seemed to respond well to direct, honest communication. The response came faster than expected. Within 2 hours, Ambassador Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main screen. The human looked professional in her dark blue uniform, her graying hair pulled back severely. Her brown eyes showed concern as she listened to Kethrak's explanation. Ambassador, she said when he finished, we appreciate you reaching out to us. This sounds like a serious situation. It is indeed, Ambassador Chun. We understand this is short notice, but the collective's resources are currently committed elsewhere. Any assistance your people could provide would be deeply appreciated. Chun paused, consulting something off-screen. I need to discuss this with my superiors, but I believe we can help. We have vessels in that sector conducting exercises. They could be redirected. Kethrak felt his throat sac deflate with relief. That would be wonderful. How soon could they arrive? Let me check fleet positions. Another pause. 72 hours. Possibly less if they push their engines. The Zephyrian ambassador couldn't hide his amazement. 72 hours? But that would require considerable speed. Our ships are well engineered, Chin replied with what might have been pride. I'll need detailed information about the plague's symptoms, environmental conditions, and supply requirements. Our medical staff will want to prepare appropriate countermeasures. Dr. Lenthera stepped forward. I can provide all medical data immediately. We're dealing with a respiratory pathogen that affects most oxygen-breathing species. Mortality rate is 30% without treatment, but it responds well to broad-spectrum antibiotics and immune boosters. Understood. We'll bring medical supplies and personnel. Is there anything else the colony needs? Food, water purification systems, temporary shelter materials, Kethrak listed. The plague has disrupted their infrastructure significantly. Ambassador Chin nodded. We'll load our ships accordingly. I should mention that our vessels are primarily military designs. They may look intimidating to civilian populations, but I assure you, our intentions are entirely humanitarian. Of course, Kethrak replied, though he filed away the warning. How intimidating could relief ships be? After ending the transmission, the council felt cautiously optimistic. Dr. Lenthera immediately began preparing medical briefings for the human teams. General Thaxor offered to coordinate with human military protocols to ensure smooth integration with collective forces already en route. I must admit, Vexani said as they prepared to adjourn, I'm curious to see these human relief vessels. Their reputation for innovation precedes them. Kethrak shared her curiosity, though something about Ambassador Chin's demeanor suggested there might be surprises ahead. Humans had a reputation for approaching problems differently than other species. Their solutions often worked, but rarely looked like what anyone expected. Over the next 3 days, updates from Colony 7 Alpha grew increasingly desperate. The death toll was climbing, and local authorities were struggling to maintain order. The colonial governor, an elderly Zephyrian named Meltar, sent hourly updates that painted an increasingly grim picture. Medical facilities overwhelmed, read his latest transmission. Food distribution networks failing. Civil unrest in settlements 4 and 9. We need help urgently. Kethrak had forwarded each update to Ambassador Chun, who acknowledged them but provided little detail about the incoming relief mission. Fleet en route, ETA 18 hours, was typical of her responses. The first sign that something unusual was happening came from the early warning sensors at Colony 7 Alpha. Chief Scanner Operator Yithal was a young Korthari with exceptional sensor skills who had volunteered for colonial service. His excited transmission reached the Collective Council just as they were reviewing the latest casualty reports. Sirs, we're detecting the relief fleet on long-range sensors. But there's something odd about the readings. Kethrak activated the communication channel. Please clarify, Operator Yithal. The ships are large, Ambassador. Much larger than standard humanitarian vessels. And the energy signatures, they're unlike anything in our databases. General Thax or leaned forward, his combat experience triggering professional interest. Can you provide specifics? The lead vessel appears to be, well, it reads like a battle cruiser, sir. Over 2 kilometers long. The escort ships are showing similar characteristics. Heavy armor, multiple weapon emplacements, advanced shielding systems. The council chamber fell silent. Dr. Linthera's antennae twitched nervously. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Maybe they're military vessels converted for humanitarian use. The energy output suggests they're fully armed and operational, Yithal continued. Sir, these aren't relief ships. These are warships. Kethrak felt his scales beginning to darken with stress. How many vessels total? 12 confirmed, sir. All military grade. The formation suggests, well, it looks like a battle group approaching at combat speed. General Thax, was now standing, his massive frame tense with concern. Ambassador, we may have a situation. If the humans have misunderstood our request. No, Kethrak said firmly, though doubt was creeping into his voice. Ambassador Chan was clear about the humanitarian nature of the mission. There must be an explanation. But privately, the Zephyrian diplomat was beginning to worry. Humanity's reputation in military matters was formidable, even among species who considered themselves warrior races. Their tactical innovations had impressed even the proud Korthari Empire. But deploying a battle group to a humanitarian crisis seemed like massive overkill. Operator Yithal, he said carefully, can you establish communication with the incoming fleet? Already trying, sir. They're responding on standard frequencies. Moments later, a new voice filled the chamber. It was crisp, professional, and unmistakably human. Colony 7 Alpha Control. This is Admiral Martinez aboard the UES Indomitable. We're your relief fleet, ETA 6 hours. Please prepare landing zones for medical personnel and supply distribution. Admiral, Kethrak interjected. This is Ambassador Kethrak of the Zephyrian Collective. We appreciate your rapid response to our humanitarian request. Understood, Ambassador. We're here to help. Be advised, our ships may cause some concern among your people due to their appearance, but our mission is entirely peaceful. We brought medical supplies, food, temporary infrastructure, and personnel to assist with the crisis. Admiral, our sensors indicate your vessels are heavily armed warships. Surely converted relief ships would have been more appropriate. There was a brief pause before Admiral Martinez responded. Ambassador, with respect, these are our relief ships. When humans respond to a crisis, we come prepared for any contingency. Our vessels are equipped to handle medical emergencies, supply shortages, infrastructure rebuilding, and security issues simultaneously. General Thax rumbled quietly to Kethrak. What kind of species uses battleships for humanitarian aid? The question hung in the air as the human fleet continued its approach. Throughout the colonial system, civilian and military observers watched in amazement as 12 massive warships prepared to deliver medical supplies and food to plague victims. Governor Meltar's latest transmission carried a note of bewildered hope. The fleet is impressive. Our people are frightened, but grateful. Should we evacuate the spaceports? Negative, came Admiral Martinez's calm reply. We'll be using precision landing protocols. Minimal disruption to civilian areas. Medical teams will deploy immediately upon arrival. As the human fleet entered the system's inner sensor range, more details became clear. The ships were sleek, angular, and bristling with advanced technology. They moved in perfect formation with a precision that spoke of exceptional training and discipline. Energy readings showed power outputs that dwarfed anything in the collective fleet. Ambassador, Dr. Lenthera said quietly, "I'm beginning to understand why humans have gained their reputation so quickly." Kethrak nodded, watching the tactical display. "They don't do anything halfway, do they?" The lead ship, the Indomitable, was indeed over 2 kilometers long. Its hull was a dark gray that seemed to absorb light, and weapon ports lined its surface like predatory teeth. Yet sensors also detected massive cargo bays, advanced medical facilities, and what appeared to be mobile manufacturing capability. Colony 7 Alpha. This is Admiral Martinez. We're beginning our approach. Medical teams are standing by for immediate deployment. Supply distribution will commence within the hour. We're here to help, and we're not leaving until the crisis is resolved. As the mighty human fleet descended toward the plague-stricken colony, Kethrak reflected on the day's events. The collective had asked for humanitarian aid and received a battle group. But somehow, looking at the efficiency and determination displayed by these human warships, he was beginning to think they might have gotten exactly what they needed. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready to see what humanitarian aid really looked like. Governor Meltar stood on the observation deck of the Colonial Administration Building, watching 12 human warships settle into landing positions around Settlement Alpha Prime. Each ship was larger than his entire governmental complex, and the sound of their engines created a harmonic rumble that could be felt through the building's foundations. The colonial leader was an experienced administrator who had served in 4 different systems during his career. He had seen collective relief operations, imperial aid convoys, and emergency responses from half a dozen species. Nothing had prepared him for this. "Sir," said his aide, a nervous young Valdris named Karen, "the human medical teams are requesting immediate access to our primary hospital complex." "Granted," Meltar replied without hesitation. The death toll had climbed to over 3,000 in the past day alone. Whatever the humans had brought, it couldn't be worse than the current situation. Through the observation deck's transparent walls, he watched as massive cargo ramps descended from the belly of the nearest human ship. What emerged made him blink in disbelief. The first vehicles were clearly medical transports, but they looked like armored personnel carriers. Behind them came supply trucks that resembled military logistics vehicles. Then came the personnel. Human medics jogged down the ramps in organized groups, wearing what appeared to be combat medical gear. They moved with military precision, but their equipment included advanced medical scanners, portable surgical units, and cases that sensor readings indicated contained sophisticated pharmaceuticals. "Governor," came a new voice over the communication system. "This is Colonel Sarah Kim, commanding the 23rd Medical Battalion. We're deploying to your hospital facilities now. We'll have additional treatment centers operational within 2 hours." Meltar activated his communicator. "Colonel, welcome to 7 Alpha. Our medical staff will provide whatever assistance they can." "Understood, Governor. We've reviewed the medical data provided by Dr. Lenthera. We believe we can significantly improve survival rates with our treatment protocols. We're also bringing advanced life support systems and surgical capabilities." The governor watched as human teams began unloading equipment that looked more advanced than anything in the Colonial Medical Center. Portable treatment pods, atmosphere processors, and devices he couldn't even identify rolled off the ships in an endless stream. "Sir," Karen said, checking his data pad, "the humans are also deploying to settlements 4 and 9. They're using aircraft." Through the observation windows, Meltar could see sleek human aircraft rising from the landed ships. They moved with impossible speed and agility, covering distances that would take ground vehicles hours to traverse. His communicator crackled again. "Governor, this is Major Chen leading our infrastructure team. We understand you're having problems with water purification and food distribution. We're setting up emergency systems now. Major, that's correct. The plague disrupted our automated systems, and we've been struggling to maintain basic services. Copy that. We're deploying mobile processing units and establishing new distribution networks. We should have clean water flowing to all settlements within 6 hours. Meltar looked at his aide in amazement. 6 hours? Our estimates suggested it would take weeks to restore full water service. More equipment continued to flow from the human ships. Prefabricated building components, atmosphere processors, communication arrays, and what appeared to be portable power generation systems. The humans worked with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Governor, came another voice. This is Captain Rodriguez, security detail. We're establishing perimeter monitoring to ensure the medical teams can work safely. Minimal disruption to civilian activities. The security teams that deployed looked exactly like what they were, elite human soldiers. They wore advanced combat armor and carried weapons that made even Meltar's experienced security forces look primitive. But their demeanor was professional and courteous as they coordinated with local authorities. Captain, Meltar responded, we appreciate the security consideration. There has been some civil unrest in the outer settlements due to resource shortages. Understood, Governor. We're monitoring the situation. If needed, we can provide crowd control and emergency supplies to affected areas. As the day progressed, reports flowed in from across the colony. Human medical teams had established treatment centers in all major settlements. Their advanced equipment was processing plague patients at a rate that exceeded the colony's original hospital capacity. Supply lines were functioning smoothly for the first time in weeks. Dr. Yin Thor, the colony's chief medical officer, contacted the governor with an update that bordered on the miraculous. Sir, the human treatments are working beyond our best projections. They've not only halted the plague's progression, but actually reversed symptoms in many patients. Their survival rate is approaching 90%. How is that possible? Meltar asked. Their medical technology is extraordinary. They're using treatment protocols that combine advanced pharmaceuticals with nanotechnology and what they call adaptive immune therapy. It's unlike anything in our medical databases. The governor nodded, watching as more human equipment was unloaded. These people had clearly come prepared for every contingency. Their ships might look like warships, but they carried more humanitarian aid capability than most species-dedicated relief fleets. His communicator activated again. Governor, this is Admiral Martinez. We're pleased with the initial response to our aid efforts. However, our long-range sensors have detected an additional complication. Meltar felt his throat sack inflate with new concern. What kind of complication, Admiral? There's an asteroid field approaching your system's outer edge. Initial analysis suggests it's not natural. The trajectory and composition indicate possible pirate harassment activity. Are you aware of any hostile forces in the area? The governor's blood chilled. Pirate raids on disaster-stricken colonies were unfortunately common. Weakened defenses and valuable supplies made for attractive targets. We have minimal defensive capability, Admiral. Our security fleet was recalled to help with the Beta Centauri crisis. Understood. We'll monitor the situation. If those asteroids turn out to be camouflage ships, we're prepared to deal with it. Meltar found himself wondering exactly what prepared to deal with it meant when spoken by the commander of a human battle group. The thought was both comforting and slightly terrifying. As evening approached, the transformation of Colony 7 Alpha was remarkable. Human medical centers were processing hundreds of patients hourly. Supply distribution networks were operating more efficiently than they had even before the crisis. Infrastructure repairs that should have taken months were being completed in days. Sir, Karen reported, the mortality rate has dropped to less than 5%. Food distribution is ahead of schedule. Water purification systems are operating at full capacity. Power grid repairs are 90% complete. Governor Meltar nodded, still somewhat stunned by the rapid progress. And the human teams? Working around the clock. They've established 3 shifts to maintain continuous operations. Their organizational efficiency is remarkable. The governor had to agree. He'd witnessed collective relief operations that were impressive, but nothing approaching this level of comprehensive capability. The humans hadn't just addressed the immediate crisis. They were rebuilding the colony's infrastructure to be more resilient than before. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Martinez. "Governor, our sensors have confirmed hostile intent. Those asteroids are indeed camouflaged pirate vessels. 12 ships total, approaching under stealth. Estimated arrival in 6 hours." Meltar felt panic rising. "Admiral, we have no way to evacuate 2 million people in 6 hours. And the plague victims who are still in treatment." "Governor," Admiral Martinez's voice was calm and reassuring. "Evacuation won't be necessary. We'll handle the pirate threat." "But, Admiral, you're here on a humanitarian mission. Your medical personnel will continue their work uninterrupted." "Governor, when humans commit to helping, we don't leave when trouble arrives. We deal with it." As night fell over Colony 7 Alpha, Governor Meltar stood again on his observation deck. The human ships still sat where they had landed, but now their weapon systems were quietly powering up. Medical operations continued without pause, but he could see human security teams taking defensive positions. The pirates approaching the system had no idea what they were flying into. They expected to find a weakened colony defended by minimal security forces. Instead, they were about to encounter 12 human warships whose crews had spent days saving lives and were unlikely to appreciate any threat to their patients. Meltar activated his colony-wide communication system. "Citizens of 7 Alpha, this is your governor. Our human allies have informed us of an approaching threat. However, they have assured me that our safety is their priority. Continue to cooperate with human medical and support personnel. Have faith in our protectors." In the distance, he could see the running lights of human patrol aircraft maintaining orbital watch. The same vessels that had delivered medical supplies hours earlier were now configured for combat patrol. The governor reflected on the day's extraordinary events. The collective had requested humanitarian aid, and the humans had responded by sending an entire battle group. At first, it had seemed like massive overkill. Now, as pirate ships approached under cover of darkness, it seemed like perfect planning. He was beginning to understand that when humans offered help, they meant it completely. Captain Voxtar had led pirate raids for 15 years across the Outer Rim territories. The Saurian commander prided himself on tactical intelligence and perfect timing. His crew of 200 mixed species had never failed to take a target, and they had never encountered serious resistance from colonial defense forces. Tonight should have been routine. Intelligence reports indicated Colony 7 Alpha was dealing with a plague outbreak and had minimal defensive capability. The collective fleet was engaged elsewhere. Local security forces had been recalled to other emergencies. It was perfect timing for a supply raid. "Status report." He growled from the command chair of his flagship, the Iron Talon. His forked tongue tasted the air, savoring the anticipation of easy victory. 12 ships in formation, Captain, reported his sensor operator, a nervous Valdris named Krell. "Stealth fields are holding. Colonial sensors show no sign of detection." Voxtar nodded his reptilian head. His fleet consisted of converted freighters and light cruisers, all equipped with stolen military hardware. They looked like asteroids on most sensors until they dropped their camouflage and struck. "Target assessment. Colony appears to be in chaos, sir. Multiple settlements, minimal defenses. Our sources were correct about the plague. Should be easy pickings." The captain's tactics were straightforward. Approach under stealth, jam communications, strike fast, and retreat with whatever supplies they could grab. Colonial authorities rarely fought back effectively, and the aftermath was someone else's problem. ETA to striking range. "For hours, sir." Voxtar settled back to wait. This would be profitable and simple. His reputation among the pirate cartels would grow, and his crew would earn enough to stay loyal for another few months. Everything was going according to plan. 3 hours later, Krell's voice carried a note of confusion. "Captain, I'm reading unusual energy signatures from the colony." "Define unusual." "Large ships on the surface, sir. Much larger than colonial defense vessels. Configuration unknown." Voxtar felt a flicker of concern. "How many ships?" 12 confirmed, sir." "Energy outputs suggest, well, they're reading like military capital ships." The pirate captain's eyes narrowed. This didn't match intelligence reports. Could be sensor ghosts. Atmospheric interference from the plague response. "Possibly, sir. But the readings are very strong. Maintain course. We'll know more when we drop stealth." But privately, Voxtar was beginning to worry. In 15 years of raiding, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this situation felt wrong. An hour later, his concerns deepened when Krell reported new contacts. "Captain, detecting patrol craft in the outer system. Moving in search patterns. Colonial security? Negative, sir. These craft are fast. Very fast. And their sensor signatures don't match anything in our database." Voxtar studied the tactical display. The patrol craft were moving with precision that spoke of military training. Their search patterns were too sophisticated for colonial security forces. "Could be collective rapid response ships," suggested his first officer, a scarred Korthari named Grink. "Maybe they diverted a fleet." "Check the timeline. How quickly could collective forces have responded?" Krell consulted his navigation computer. "Fastest possible response time would be 4 days, sir. We're only 3 days out from when the crisis began." The mathematics didn't work. No collective fleet could have arrived this quickly, which meant either the intelligence was wrong, or these were ships from somewhere else. "Captain," Krell said nervously, "I'm getting partial identification on the surface ships. Computer suggests they're human vessels." Voxtar felt his scales ripple with sudden unease. "Human? That's impossible. Humans don't have ships in this sector." "Database shows possible matches with human military designs, sir. But it's fragmentary data." The pirate captain stared at the display. Human involvement changed everything. Humanity's military reputation had spread quickly through underworld networks. Stories of impossible tactical victories, advanced technology, and absolutely ruthless efficiency in combat. "Sir," Grank said quietly, "maybe we should consider alternative targets." Voxtar's pride warred with his survival instincts. He had never backed down from a raid, and his reputation depended on that consistency. But humans... Maintain approach, he decided. We'll assess the situation when we reach scanning range. If it's truly a human fleet, we'll abort. But I won't run from sensor ghosts and maybes. His crew seemed less confident, but they followed orders. The Iron Talon and its escort ships continued their approach under stealth, while patrol craft moved in expanding search patterns throughout the system. As they closed to active scanning range, the truth became undeniable. 12 massive human warships sat on Colony 7 Alpha's surface, their hulls bristling with weapon systems that made Voxtar's stolen military hardware look like children's toys. "Captain," Krell whispered, "those aren't relief ships. Those are frontline human battlecruisers." Voxtar studied the tactical readouts. Each human ship was individually more powerful than his entire fleet. Their combined firepower could sterilize the colony's surface if they chose. "Sir," Grink urged, "we should abort. This is not a viable target." But even as Voxtar prepared to order retreat, pride and greed held him back. The colony still contained valuable supplies. The humans were supposedly here for humanitarian reasons. Maybe they wouldn't interfere with a quick raid on the outer settlements. "We proceed," he decided, "but carefully. Target Settlement 6 on the outer continent. Minimal human presence. Quick grab and run." His officers exchanged worried glances, but prepared for the assault. Voxtar had led them through many successful raids. Perhaps his luck would hold. They were halfway to their target when human patrol craft found them. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 5, Krell reported, his voice climbing with panic. Single human fighter. It's seen us. On the display, a sleek human craft had dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. It was small compared to the pirate ships, but its energy signature was impressive. Unidentified vessels. Came a calm human voice over the communication channel. This is Lieutenant Sarah Park of the Human Expeditionary Force. You are approaching a quarantine zone during an active humanitarian operation. Please state your intentions and destination. Volkstar hesitated. The smart move was to claim they were traitors or refugees. But his ship's configuration clearly marked it as a military vessel. We are independent traders seeking safe harbor during the crisis, he finally responded. Copy that, Lieutenant Park replied. Be aware that all shipping traffic is being directed to orbital checkpoint stations for health and security screening. Please follow my lead to Checkpoint Alpha. The human fighter began moving toward a vector that would take them away from the colony entirely. Voxtar realized this was his chance to escape without confrontation. But Grenk was studying their sensors. Captain, that's a single fighter against 12 ships. And the checkpoint is probably minimal security. Greed overruled wisdom. All ships target the fighter. Quick engagement, then proceed to raid target. 12 pirate ships dropped their stealth fields and opened fire on Lieutenant Park's fighter. The response was not what Voxtar expected. The human fighter didn't attempt to flee. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the pirate formation while executing combat maneuvers that seemed to violate physics. Weapons fire that should have vaporized the small craft passed harmlessly through space as the pilot performed impossible evasive patterns. How is it moving like that? Grenk demanded. Unknown, sir. Its acceleration curves are beyond database parameters. Lieutenant Park's voice remained calm despite being outnumbered 12-1. Hostile action confirmed. All human units, we have pirates engaging a humanitarian mission. Weapons free. Repeat, weapons free. The communication channel suddenly filled with new voices. Hunter 1 engaging. Hunter 2, targets acquired. Hunter 3, moving to intercept. This is Wolverine Squadron. We're inbound. Voxtar's sensor operator's voice cracked. Captain, I'm reading multiple contacts launching from the surface ships. Estimat 40 plus fighter incoming. The pirate captain stared in disbelief. The humans hadn't just brought battlecruisers. They had brought fighter wings. Evasive action. All ships, evasive action. But the human fighters moved like nothing in Voxtar's experience. They closed the distance between ships in seconds, weaving through defensive fire with impossible agility. Their weapons were precise and devastating. The first pirate ship to die was the Rusty Claw, a converted freighter on the fleet's left flank. Human fighters swarmed it like predators, their weapons cutting through its shields and armor like paper. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, taking 43 pirates with it. Return fire. Return fire. Voxtar screamed. His ships tried, but hitting the human fighters was like trying to catch shadows. They moved in three-dimensional patterns that seemed choreographed, never staying in one position long enough to be targeted effectively. Meanwhile, their return fire was surgical in its precision. They targeted engines, weapons systems, and critical infrastructure with accuracy that spoke of exceptional training and advanced targeting systems. Captain, Krell reported desperately, we've lost the Bone Crusher and the Void Stalker. The Blood Moon is venting atmosphere. We have to retreat. But retreat was no longer an option. The human fighters had surrounded the pirate formation in a sphere of death. Every escape vector was covered by multiple attackers. Mayday, Mayday, came a transmission from one of his escort ships. This is the Dark Star. We're taking heavy damage. Request immediate assistance. Voxtar could only watch helplessly as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans fought with a coordination and efficiency that was terrifying to witness. They didn't seem emotional or angry about the attack. They simply proceeded to destroy the pirate ships with mechanical precision. Sir, Grenk said quietly, perhaps we should surrender. The idea was humiliating, but staying alive seemed more important than pride. Voxtar opened a general communication channel. Human forces, this is Captain Voxtar. We surrender. Repeat, we surrender. The weapon's fire stopped immediately. Captain Voxtar came a new voice, calm and professional. This is Admiral Martinez aboard the UES Indomitable. Your surrender is acknowledged. You will follow escort instructions and prepare for boarding and detention. Relief flooded through Voxtar. At least they would live. Admiral, we acknowledge. We will comply with escort instructions. Understood. Be advised that any further hostile action will result in the immediate destruction of your vessels. We have sick people to protect, and we take that responsibility seriously. As human fighters formed up around the surviving pirate ships, Voxtar reflected on the disaster. He had attacked what he thought was a soft target, and instead encountered a military force that outclassed him in every possible way. More importantly, these humans had been conducting a humanitarian mission. They were saving lives, and he had tried to interfere with that. Looking back on the engagement, their response had been measured and professional. They could have destroyed his entire fleet in minutes, but had chosen to disable rather than destroy once surrender was offered. Captain, Krell said softly, incoming transmission from the colony. Governor Meltar's face appeared on the screen, his expression mixing relief and amazement. Captain Voxtar, I am Governor Meltar of Colony 7 Alpha. I wanted you to understand what you attempted to disrupt tonight. The governor's words hit harder than weapons fire. Our people were dying of plague. These human ships arrived 3 days ago and have been working around the clock to save lives. They brought medicine, food, clean water, and hope. Their medical teams have reduced our mortality rate from 30% to less than 5%. Voxtar felt shame washing over him. Governor, tonight, while you approached under stealth to raid our supplies, human medical teams were performing surgery to save the lives of children. While your weapons targeted our protectors, human engineers were repairing our water treatment plants. The weight of his actions settled on Voxtar's shoulders. He had nearly interfered with a mission that was saving thousands of lives. The humans could have destroyed you instantly, the governor continued. Instead, they disabled your ships and preserved your lives. They show more mercy to pirates than pirates show to plague victims. Admiral Martinez's voice cut into the transmission. Captain Voxtar, you and your crew will be transported to collective custody for processing. Medical teams will treat your wounded. Food and water will be provided during transport. Even in detention, the humans were offering humanitarian aid. As human ships moved to escort the pirate vessels to holding positions, Voxtar watched the continued operations on Colony 7 Alpha. Medical transports continued moving between settlements. Supply distribution proceeded without interruption. The humanitarian mission had not paused for a moment during the combat. Sir, Grink asked quietly, what kind of species uses battlecruisers for medical missions? Voxtar didn't have an answer. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The humans had responded to a humanitarian crisis with overwhelming force, but that force was dedicated to saving lives rather than taking them. When pirates had threatened their mission, they had dealt with the threat efficiently and then immediately returned to helping people. They had shown mercy to enemies while showing absolute dedication to victims. The kind that wins, he finally answered. Hours later, as human ships prepare to transport the captured pirates to collective custody, Voxtar received one final transmission from Admiral Martinez. Captain, during your detention, I recommend you consider what happened here tonight. When humans commit to helping people, we don't abandon that commitment when trouble arrives. We deal with trouble and continue helping people. The transmission continued. Your crews will receive medical care, food, and transportation to proper authorities. Not because you deserve it, but because that's what civilized beings do for prisoners. As the Iron Talon was towed away by a human escort vessel, Voxtar looked back at Colony 7 Alpha. The human ships still sat on the surface, their medical operations continuing without pause. Lights blazed from temporary treatment centers. Supply convoys moved between settlements. The work of saving lives proceeded around the clock. He had planned to raid a weakened colony and instead had encountered a demonstration of what humanity meant when they offered aid. They didn't just bring medicine and food. They brought the absolute commitment to see the mission through regardless of obstacles. The pirates had learned that humanitarian missions came with full military protection, not because humans were violent, but because they refused to let violence stop them from helping people. In his detention cell aboard the human escort ship, Voxtar was treated with professional courtesy. Medical attention for his wounded crew, regular meals, clean quarters. Even prisoners received humanitarian care from these strange beings. As he drifted off to sleep, the former pirate captain found himself wondering what the galaxy would look like if more species approached crises the way humans did. With overwhelming capability dedicated entirely to positive outcomes. It was a disturbing thought for someone who had spent his life taking advantage of others' weaknesses. But as the human ship carried him toward collective justice, Voxtar began to suspect that the age of successful piracy in human-protected space was rapidly coming to an end. Back on Colony 7 Alpha, Governor Meltar stood once again on his observation deck. The crisis was ending. Plague victims were recovering. Infrastructure was rebuilt. The pirate threat had been eliminated with minimal disruption to relief operations. In less than a week, the humans had accomplished what would have taken months using traditional methods. They had brought not just aid, but the overwhelming force necessary to ensure that aid reached those who needed it. As dawn broke over Settlement Alpha Prime, human medical teams were already beginning their next shift. The work continued, protected by an umbrella of military might that existed solely to ensure no one could interfere with the mission of saving lives. The governor activated his daily colony-wide broadcast. Citizens of 7 Alpha, our friends continue their work. Medical operations are ahead of schedule. Infrastructure repairs are nearly complete. Thanks to our human allies, we are not just surviving this crisis. We are emerging stronger than before. He paused, watching human aircraft maintaining their protective patrols while medical transports move between settlements. We have learned what it means when humans offer aid. They do not simply provide help. They provide hope. And they defend that hope against any threat. In the distance, he could see one of the massive human battlecruisers preparing for departure. Its mission at 7 Alpha was nearly complete. Soon it would return to whatever duties occupied human fleets when they weren't saving lives. But the governor knew that somewhere else in the galaxy, another crisis was developing. And when it did, humans would respond with the same overwhelming dedication to helping people that had transformed his colony from catastrophe to recovery in less than a week. The thought was comforting. In an uncertain galaxy, it was good to know that when humans promised aid, they delivered not just help, but the absolute commitment to see that help succeed. 3 months after the crisis at Colony 7 Alpha, Ambassador Kethrak stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the Grand Chamber of the Nexus Station. Representatives from 47 different species filled the curved seating areas. Their attention focused on his presentation about humanity's humanitarian capabilities. "Colleagues," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, "we must reconsider our understanding of human crisis response protocols." The Zephyrian diplomat activated the holographic display, showing before and after images of Colony 7 Alpha. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been overwhelmed medical facilities and failing infrastructure, now stood modern treatment centers and upgraded systems that exceeded pre-crisis capabilities. The humans accomplished in 1 week what our best estimates suggested would require 3 months, Kethrak continued. But more significantly, they redefined what humanitarian aid means in practical terms. Counselor Vexani leaned forward, her crystalline form shimmering with interest. "Ambassador, your report indicates they deployed military vessels for medical missions. This seems unusual." "That's precisely the point," Kethrak replied. "We operate under the assumption that humanitarian aid and military force are separate functions. Humans integrate them seamlessly. He changed the display to show technical specifications of human ships. These vessels combine medical facilities equivalent to our best hospitals with manufacturing capability, advanced research laboratories, and defensive systems that exceed most military standards. When humans offer aid, they bring complete solutions. The reaction from the council was mixed. Some representatives seemed impressed, others concerned. General Thaxor, representing the Korthari military interests, spoke from his position in the War Council section. Ambassador, are you suggesting humans use humanitarian missions as cover for military deployment? This could represent a significant threat to galactic stability. No, General Ketrak replied firmly. Quite the opposite. I'm suggesting humans take humanitarian missions so seriously that they deploy military assets to ensure success. Their priority is saving lives, not projecting power. Dr. Linthera activated her personal communicator from the Medical Council area. Ambassador, I've been reviewing the medical data from 7 Alpha. The human treatment protocols showed effectiveness rates beyond anything in our databases. How is this possible? According to Admiral Martinez, Kethrak said, consulting his notes, humans prepare for humanitarian crises the same way they prepare for military campaigns. Total commitment of resources, redundant capabilities, and plans for every contingency. The display changed to show organizational charts. They don't just bring medicine. They bring mobile pharmaceutical manufacturing. They don't just bring food. They bring agricultural systems and water purification technology. They don't just treat symptoms. They rebuild the infrastructure that created the crisis. Counselor Marin's tentacles writhed thoughtfully. This level of preparation suggests enormous resource dedication. How do they maintain such capabilities? That's what makes it remarkable, Kethrak replied. These weren't specialized humanitarian vessels. These were frontline military ships reconfigured for relief operations in transit. Their standard military equipment includes medical facilities, manufacturing capability, and infrastructure support systems. The implications began to sink in around the chamber. If human military vessels routinely carried humanitarian capabilities, it suggested an approach to warfare and diplomacy unlike anything in galactic history. Ambassador, asked Counselor Yithmol of the Andronian Trade Federation, what happened when pirates attempted to interfere with their operations? Kethrak had been expecting this question. The human response was educational. They eliminated the pirate threat in 18 minutes while maintaining uninterrupted medical operations. More significantly, they provided medical care and humane detention for the captured pirates. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Pirate activity had been increasing throughout the Outer Rim, largely because most species lacked the resources to mount effective counter-piracy operations during humanitarian crises. General Thaxor, Kethrak addressed the Korthari representative directly. I believe you should review the tactical data from that engagement. Human combat effectiveness exceeded our most optimistic projections. The massive Korthari's scarred features darkened slightly. How significantly? 12 pirate vessels disabled or destroyed by human fighter craft. 0 human casualties. Engagement duration, 18 minutes. Human medical operations never paused. The chamber fell silent. Every military representative present understood those numbers. Fighter craft simply didn't achieve those kinds of results against determined opposition unless they possessed overwhelming technological and tactical advantages. Ambassador, General Thaxor said carefully, are you suggesting humans could eliminate pirate activity in the Outer Rim territories? I'm suggesting, Kethrak replied, that pirate activity stops being profitable when humanitarian missions come with military escorts capable of that level of response. Dr. Linthera spoke again. What about the medical outcomes? Can other species replicate their treatment protocols? Kethrak smiled, his throat sac inflating slightly with what passed for Zephyrian amusement. The humans have offered to share their medical advances freely with all collective members. They consider improved galactic health standards a matter of common interest. This announcement generated considerable excitement among the medical representatives. Access to advanced human medical technology could revolutionize treatment capabilities across dozens of worlds. There are conditions, however, Kethrak continued. They expect the technology to be used for humanitarian purposes only. They've also offered to provide training and technical support for implementation. Counselor Vexani's crystalline voice carried a note of suspicion. What do humans gain from sharing advanced technology freely? According to Ambassador Chun, Kethrak replied, they gain a galaxy where fewer people die from preventable causes. Apparently, they consider this adequate compensation. The concept seemed to puzzle many representatives. Most species approach technology sharing as a form of trade negotiation, seeking economic or political advantages. The idea of sharing advances simply to reduce suffering was unusual in galactic politics. Ambassador, asked Counselor Zenthak of the Pylarian Consortium, how do humans view their role in galactic affairs? This level of capability suggests they could dominate regional politics if they chose. Kethrak had spent considerable time pondering this question. Based on my interactions with their leadership, humans seem more interested in solving problems than controlling territory. They approach crises as challenges to overcome rather than opportunities to exploit. He changed the display to show a galactic map marking human activities since the 7 Alpha incident. They've responded to 17 different humanitarian crises in the past 3 months. Medical emergencies, natural disasters, infrastructure failures, and refugee situations. In every case, they provided aid and withdrew once local capabilities were restored. The pattern was clear. Human ships appeared during crises, solved problems with overwhelming efficiency, and departed without seeking political or economic concessions. General Thax rumbled thoughtfully. This represents a new model for galactic engagement. Military capability deployed exclusively for positive outcomes. Exactly, Kethrak agreed. It changes the strategic balance significantly. Species considering aggressive actions must now factor in the possibility of human intervention on behalf of victims. The implications were staggering. For centuries, interstellar politics had operated under the assumption that military force and humanitarian aid were separate functions performed by different organizations with different priorities. Humans had made them the same function. Colleagues, Kethrak continued, we must decide how to integrate this reality into our strategic planning. Humans have essentially created a new category of international relations, humanitarian hegemony. Define that term, requested Counselor Marin. The ability to project overwhelming force anywhere in the galaxy for the sole purpose of helping people, Kethrak replied. It's not traditional military dominance, because they don't seek to control territory. It's not economic hegemony, because they don't seek profit. It's something entirely new. Dr. Linthera spoke from the medical section. Ambassador, based on your observations, how should other species adapt to this new reality? My recommendation, Kethrak said carefully, is that we embrace cooperation with human humanitarian efforts. Their capabilities are too valuable to ignore, and their intentions appear genuinely benevolent. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But we should also understand that human involvement fundamentally changes crisis response expectations. When humans offer aid, populations will expect the same level of capability from everyone else. This was a sobering thought. Human humanitarian standards were so high that other species' efforts might seem inadequate by comparison. The political implications were significant. Counselor Vexani raised a crucial question. What happens if humans refuse to intervene in a crisis? Unknown, Kethrak admitted. They haven't refused any request for aid yet. But if they did, the political consequences could be severe. Populations who know human capabilities exist might not accept lesser alternatives. General Thax leaned forward. Ambassador, in your assessment, could the collective match human humanitarian capabilities if we coordinated our resources? Kethrak considered this carefully. Possibly, but it would require fundamental changes to how we approach crisis response. We would need to integrate medical, engineering, logistics, and security functions into unified rapid response capabilities. Most importantly, we would need to prioritize humanitarian outcomes over political considerations. The challenge was enormous. The collective had operated for centuries under bureaucratic procedures that prioritize consensus and careful resource allocation. Human crisis response appeared to prioritize speed and overwhelming capability over careful planning. Colleagues, Kethrak said, addressing the full council, I believe we're witnessing the emergence of a new model for galactic civilization. Humans have demonstrated that sufficient technological capability, properly organized, can solve most humanitarian crises quickly and completely. He activated a final display showing comparative response times and outcomes. Traditional collective response to the 7 Alpha crisis would have required 6 weeks and achieved 60% of affected population recovery. Human response required 4 days and achieved 95% recovery with infrastructure improvements. The numbers spoke for themselves. Human methods weren't just more effective. They were orders of magnitude more effective. My recommendation, Kethrak concluded, is that we establish formal cooperation protocols with human humanitarian forces. We should also begin developing our own integrated crisis response capabilities modeled on human methods. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives worried about becoming dependent on human aid. Others argued for immediate cooperation agreements. Military representatives wanted access to human tactical innovations. Medical representatives wanted technology sharing agreements. Eventually, Councillor Vexani called for preliminary votes on 3 propositions: formal cooperation with human humanitarian efforts, establishment of integrated collective crisis response capabilities, and request for human technical assistance in developing improved medical technologies. All 3 passed overwhelmingly. As the council session concluded, Kethrak reflected on the broader implications of what they had discussed. Humanity had been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years, but they were already reshaping expectations about what was possible. More importantly, they were doing it through competence and generosity rather than force and intimidation. They had created a form of soft power that was irresistible because it was genuinely helpful. Walking through the Nexus Station's diplomatic quarters after the session, Kethrak encountered Ambassador Chun in one of the informal meeting areas. The human diplomat was reviewing reports on her personal tablet. Ambassador Chun, he greeted her, I've just finished presenting our assessment of your humanitarian capabilities to the full council. Chun looked up with interest. How was it received? With considerable amazement, Kethrak replied honestly. Your people have redefined what crisis response means in practical terms. We just do what needs to be done, Chun said simply. When people are dying, you don't hold back resources because of bureaucratic protocols or political considerations. The simplicity of the statement was striking. For humans, humanitarian crises apparently demanded total commitment regardless of other factors. Ambassador, Kethrak asked, how many ships does your government maintain specifically for humanitarian missions? Chin's smile suggested he was asking the wrong question. Ambassador, all our ships are equipped for humanitarian missions. Military vessels, exploration ships, cargo haulers, research platforms. When someone needs help, we use whatever's available. The answer explained everything. Humans didn't separate humanitarian capability from other functions. They built it into everything they did. The Council has voted to request formal cooperation protocols, Kethrak informed her. They're also interested in technical assistance for developing improved medical capabilities. We'd be happy to help, Chin replied immediately. Better galactic medical standards benefit everyone. As they talked, Kethrak realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species with the capability to dominate regional politics was choosing instead to focus on solving problems and helping people. The long-term implications were staggering. If human methods spread throughout the galaxy, it could mean the end of preventable humanitarian crises. It could also mean the end of regional conflicts that depended on victims being unable to access outside help. Ambassador Chun, he asked finally, what does humanity ultimately hope to achieve through these humanitarian efforts? The human diplomat's answer was characteristic in its directness. A galaxy where people don't die from preventable causes, where crises get solved quickly, and where everyone has access to the resources they need to build better lives. Kethrak nodded slowly. It was an ambitious goal, but based on what he had witnessed at Colony 7 Alpha, it might actually be achievable. In that case, he said, the collective looks forward to learning from your example. As the two diplomats continued their conversation, reports were already being transmitted to governments throughout the galaxy. The news was spreading. Humans had created a new model for international relations based on overwhelming competence applied to humanitarian goals. The age of humanitarian hegemony had begun, and the galaxy was about to discover what it meant when the most powerful military force in known space decided its primary mission was saving lives rather than taking them. In distant systems, colonial administrators were already beginning to wonder when human ships might appear over their worlds. Pirates were reconsidering the profitability of raiding disaster zones. Military planners were studying engagement reports and revising their estimates of human capabilities. But most importantly, populations facing crises were beginning to hope that help might come not in weeks or months, but in days, delivered by ships that brought not just aid, but the absolute commitment to ensure that aid succeeded. The humans had offered humanitarian relief, and the galaxy had received a fundamental transformation in what was possible when beings decided that helping others was worth their very best efforts. 6 months later, when the next major crisis struck in the Epsilon Draconis system, the request for aid was transmitted simultaneously to collective headquarters and human diplomatic channels. The response pattern was becoming familiar. Human ships arrived first, solved the immediate crisis with overwhelming efficiency, and provided technical assistance to prevent recurrence. What was changing was that other species were beginning to adopt human methods. Integrated response fleets, advanced medical capabilities, rapid deployment protocols, and the absolute priority of humanitarian outcomes over political considerations. The galaxy was learning that when someone offered help, the appropriate response was to provide the best help possible, as quickly as possible, and to ensure that nothing interfered with the mission of saving lives. It was a lesson that humanity had apparently learned long before joining galactic civilization, and they were teaching it one crisis at a time to everyone else.